Hi, everyone. I'm going to cover the sexual violence victimization data. And I want to get you oriented to this slide because there's a lot here. This is prevalence of sexual violence. This is among women only. I'm going to do women, and then I'll have similar slides for men. And the bars, there's dark bars and light bars. The dark bars are the lifetime prevalence estimates, and the lighter bars are the 12 months. So in the last 12-month prevalence. So we're going to start on the left, contact sexual violence. That is our combination measure, and it combines for women, rape, sexual coercion, unwanted sexual contact together into one measure. So we see here in the lifetime, nearly half of women, 45.1% in the US, experience some kind of contact sexual violence in their lifetimes, and about 1 in 18, or about 5.5% in the past 12 months, experienced some kind of contact sexual violence. As the name suggests, it's any type of sexual violence that involves physical contact. And now, when we look at rape, we see that 1 in 5 women, about 21%, reported completed or attempted rape in their lifetime. 1.1% experienced that in the last 12 months. Sexual coercion, we see 1 in 5, similar to rape. 1 in 5 women, about 20%, experienced sexual coercion in their lifetime, about 3%, a little under 3% in the past 12 months. Unwanted sexual contact, we see 4 in 10 women in their lifetime, 39.1% reported unwanted sexual contact in their lifetime, and about 3% in the last 12 months. And the next two sets of bars are about harassment. We have 3 in 10 women experiencing verbal sexual harassment in the workplace. That's 30.4%. Or in a public place, that's 29.5% in their lifetimes. And in the last 12 months, about 1 in 28 women experienced verbal sexual harassment in the workplace, and about 1 in 12 women, or 8.6%, in a public place in the last year. And then finally, I'm excited to share that we have now some technology-facilitated sexual violence measures. This is new to NISVS, and we have 2 measures that I'll talk about in a minute. But overall, we find that over 1 in 4 women experienced some kind of technology-facilitated sexual violence in their lifetimes. That's 28.2%. The lifetime measure or estimate, and 1 in 10 in the past 12 months, about 10%. So this slide is looking at the subtypes of rape. So if we're looking at the subtypes of rape, we see that nearly 1 in 5 women experience completed or attempted forced penetration in their lifetimes, and that's about 1% in the past 12 months. When we look just at completed forced penetration, we find 16% in the lifetime and less than 1% in the past 12 months. The next set is 7% experienced attempted forced penetration in their lifetime, and about 0.4% in the last 12 months. And then the last bar there is completed alcohol or drug facilitated penetration, and that's 8.2% for the lifetime estimate for women. And the 12-month estimate for alcohol drug facilitated is unstable, and we couldn't report it. Okay, this slide shows the prevalence of the subtypes of technology-facilitated sexual violence that I just mentioned. These are our new measures on NISVS. We have 2 measures covering tech-facilitated SV. First one on the left, over 1 in 4 women, about 26.9% of women, received unwanted sexual messages or images in their lifetime. And about 1 in 10 women experienced this in the past 12 months, 9.8%. And then the other measure is about distributing images. So we found that 1 in 15 women, 6.8%, reported that someone distributed their sexual image without their consent. And that was almost 2% in the past 12 months. Here we are including the lifetime prevalence by state with some high-level categories here for women. As a reminder, as Sharon mentioned, we're counting DC as a state, so we have a total of 51 states for this purpose. So across the states, we see that lifetime prevalence of contact sexual violence ranged from 35.1 to 69.9%, and that includes all the states. That, again, contact sexual violence is our combined number, so it's any sexual violence that involves physical contact. We also found state estimates of any type of completed or attempted rape for women ranged from 13% to 40.9%. That range includes all but one state. For sexual coercion, we find the lifetime state estimates range from 13.7% to 3%. That includes all but two states. And then lastly, the lifetime state estimates for unwanted sexual contact ranged from 26.4% to 61.3%. That range includes all states. Okay, so now I'm going to share a series of similar slides, except they're for men's victimization experiences. So again, this is the slide that has all the types. Lifetime is the darker bar, and 12-month prevalence is the lighter colored bar. So here we have on the left, starting on the left, contact sexual violence. We see that more than 1 in 6 men, that's 16.9%, experience some kind of contact sexual violence in their lifetimes, and about 2% of men experience this in the past 12 months. For rape, we found that 3.2% of men reported completed or attempted rape, and the 12-month prevalence was not stable for rape of men. Made to penetrate, which is also included for men, we measure that only for men. It's the experience of being made to penetrate someone else. And that made to penetrate is also included in the contact sexual violence overall estimate for men. So for made to penetrate, we found 3.8% of men experienced this in their lifetime, and the 12-month prevalence was not stable for made to penetrate. For sexual coercion of men, we find 6% experience this in their lifetime, less than 1% in the past 12 months. I should say that sexual coercion is any kind of non-physically forced penetration. That's how it's measured in NISVS. So it's differentiating it from rape or made to penetrate. It's penetration happens, but it's non-physically forced. So it could be begging and pleading, or using power and authority over someone. So that's what our sexual coercion measure is that I meant to say earlier. Unwanted sexual contact, we find for men 13.8% reported this in their lifetime. In the last 12 months, the estimate is 1.3% of men. And then the two harassment measures, we have 1 in 9 men experienced verbal sexual harassment in the workplace. That's 11.3%. And 2.8% in the past 12 months, that's in the workplace. And then 1 in 14 men, or about 7%, were verbally harassed in a public place, and 2% experienced that in the past 12 months. And then the tech facilitated measure, this is again our new measure, 1 in 6 men, 15.4% experienced tech facilitated sexual violence in their lifetimes, and about 1 in 14 men, or just under 7%, experienced that in the past 12 months. Okay, now this is a little bit different than the orientation to the other slides. This, because as I mentioned earlier, for rape and made to penetrate, we do not have 12-month stable estimates for men. So in this slide, we are using the dark bars to be rape, and the lighter bars are made to penetrate, and these are all lifetime estimates. So when we look closer at rape and made to penetrate in the subtypes, we find, starting on the left, that completed or attempted forced penetration. Forced rape penetration was 2.9% for men, or about 1 in 34 men. Forced penetration of made to penetrate was 2.5% for men, about 1 in 40. Looking at the next set of bars, completed forced penetration, we find completed forced rape to be 2.2% in the lifetime, and completed forced made to penetrate being 1.3% for males in their lifetime. Attempted forced penetration, the next set of bars, we find, when we just look at attempted forced penetration, we find attempted forced rape to be 1.4% for males, and attempted forced made to penetrate 1.6% for males. That's about 1 in 71 males and 1 in 62 males, respectively. And finally, the completed alcohol drug facilitated penetration, the last set of bars, completed alcohol drug facilitated rape for men was 1.3%, and alcohol drug facilitated made to penetrate for men was 2.3%. Okay, prevalence of tech facilitated for men. These are the two subtypes that I mentioned for women. Here are the male estimates. So we see that over 1 in 7 men, or 14%, received unwanted sexual messages or images in their lifetime. And in the last 12 months, that estimate is 6.3%, or about 1 in 16 males. And then the other distribution of sexual images without consent. This is 1 in 24 men experience this in their lifetime, 4.2%, or 1.7% in the past 12 months. Okay, this is the state ranges that we have for men for sexual violence data. We find among states that lifetime prevalence of contact sexual violence, that combined measure, from 10.8% to 35.9% for males, and that includes 24 states that had reportable estimates for males. Lifetime state estimates of unwanted sexual contact ranged from 9.4% to 31.3% for males. 14 states had reportable estimates for the male data. And finally, the state estimates for rape made to penetrate and sexual coercion were not stable, the state level estimates, so we were not able to present those or present ranges for those. And that is it for the sexual violence data.
I'm going to jump in, ask a couple clarifying questions. So I think it's important to recognize that this is data that was collected in 23-24, and that the previous NISVS report was data that was collected in 2016 and 2017. And if I'm doing my memory right, the first reports was data that was collected in 2010, 11, and 12, or I guess there was, actually, there was a little more nuance than that, which ones you grouped. So what's exciting about this is that we have new NISVS data that's based on what was collected in 23 and 24. Until now, we were relying on data that was pre-pandemic and getting to be quite old. So when's a good time to update your data with you share with external partners? And I think that this is sort of the good opportunity now, is that this is a time to be able to get some updated data. I know I always pay attention to when people are quoting the most recent report versus an old report. I still see people quoting the very first NISVS reports. So is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you captured it, David. We are very excited to have the new 23-24 data. It does give, of course, we can't talk about trends because we've had so many changes in method and breaks in data, but it's definitely important to have new data, and we're really excited to share it.
And part of the new data is the technology pieces.
Yeah, definitely over time, there are new things that come up, and we do consider new measures. We don't know exactly if that's going to end up on NISVS. We are also hoping in the future to have some more tech facilitated and AI types of questions on YRBS. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, but we're definitely always looking for ways to capture whatever is emerging in the field and try to measure that in the different data sets that we have.
We want to talk about how people can use multiple data sources to help tell the story for their community and be able to move forward. Can you reflect on the range of states, why there's such a range of states? Any thoughts about that? You're on the slide that we're seeing now, we're seeing around contact sexual violence from 10.8% to 35.9%. That's a pretty big range. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what's happening there. We do know that it doesn't necessarily mean that the victimization happened in that state. It's just that the burden exists in that state. The persons who experienced the violence reside in that state. But it is interesting that it does range that much, and we don't know exactly what it is, but we do know that the 12-month estimates are the most interesting ones to track for that. And we don't always have stable 12-month estimates. But the lifetime burden in particular is not necessarily meaning that it happened in the state.